Well, hi, Paul. Thank you so much for helping my project. Could you say a little bit about yourself?
Thanks for considering me. About myself, I live in Guadalajara, Mexico. I'm 38 years old. I work in a technology company, HP. I live here in downtown in the city. Um, have no pets or something, is very usual these days. And I think that's pretty much about me. My hobbies are going outdoors, biking, walking, and I decided to like subscribe for this interview or get into this interview because I'm since I was young I was like a fan of science. Um, I used to have a microscope and playing with plants and soil, something like that. Uh, I think
Uh,
that
do,
will be pretty much it.
do you still do that? Or did you give that up since the time you were a child?
No, I just get the plants hobby still, but just that.
So I guess what made it you decide not to pursue a career in science?
I when I graduated from high school, one of my first options was biology. But here in Mexico, it's a little complex. Science is not that well paid. There's some like issues to get sometimes uh, like career on that. So besides biology, my second the thing that I like or I like the most is finance. That's why I decided that one. Yeah. Then some years later, I found that also psychology. That's something I liked also, and I ended studying psychology too.
That's really neat. Let's see, this past weekend I was traveling through Boston Airport
Mm.
and I was wearing a space shirt. And this guy says, "Hey, you're interested in space?" I said, "Yes, I am." And he says, "I work at SpaceX. I'm an accountant at SpaceX, and
Mm.
I'm trying to figure out, my job is to figure out how much the rocket costs to operate." So you could definitely combine finance with science too.
Yeah, yeah, that's, never thought about that, but yeah,
Um, well, I was wondering if how long have you lived in Guadalajara?
my whole life.
Did you know in 2018 there was this international conference that was in Guadalajara called the IAC, the International Astronautical Congress, and it's like the oldest space conference, and they have it in a different city every year. This
Oh,
year it's in Baku, Azerbaijan, and it's been in like
mm,
Australia and here's. But Sanya, Christopher, my youngest son, and I all went to Guadalajara to see this conference
oh,
because
nice.
Elon Musk was going to be unveiling what at the time was called the Interplanetary Transportation System, and now is that big starship that they're building in Brownsville. Um, I was curious if you had heard about that
No,
conference. Like,
no, I haven't. Yeah, I no. I guess maybe that was pretty specific. It was in 2018.
yeah,
Oh, I didn't hear. Yeah, sounds really interesting.
yeah. In fact, I think it was either at the end, like in October of 2018. I think that's when it was. But
Around these dates.
it's true.
Yeah,
Oh, well, did you know that NASA is planning to send astronauts back to the moon?
yeah.
Um,
I was in Houston back in August, and I that was my first time in NASA. So it was pretty interesting, and I saw that, and also I knew from Sonia. She mentioned that, and that's how I knew about this interview.
oh, what do you think about us going back to the moon?
I think I think it's really interesting. I kept a little being a little skeptic. Skeptic is the word, right?
A
Like
skeptic.
a skeptic, yeah, because there are these theories that the the man has never touched the moon. It was just a conspiracy. Just they were recording someplace in Earth. And I'm moving between I believe it and sometimes I don't, because I think it's something really incredible to take a human to elsewhere out of Earth. So I think it's good to. I didn't. I recently found they were sending again people to the moon, but I think it's it's a lot of technology required, and I think that because I mean from what I know, the last time a man was placed in on the moon, it was a long time ago, right? And now with the technology and all of that, it could be a pretty big difference between the past and now.
Yeah, the last time somebody stepped foot on the moon was 1972.
Oh no, it's a lot.
I know. I
50
wasn't born
years.
then.
Yeah.
Um, and what do you think all this might lead up to? Like, if you were to look ahead 200 years, what do you think humanity looks like in 200 years?
In 200 years, I think we will have this constraint in resources, water, food. I think like in 200 years, my idea is that if we continue as we are now, like all the consumption and how we are using the natural resources, I think in 200 years we will have some issues about contamination in the water, lakes, seas. I think if it continues like it is now, it's not like a positive scenario about the environment here on Earth. And I think we might be more connected by technology, but not really to the, I mean, animals, plant, to the natural environment.
Hmm. Do you think in 200 years it's worse or better than it is now?
I think worst.
Worse. It,
Yeah.
do you do you think we have people living on other planets by that point, or are we still only on the Earth?
200. I think other people living in other planets, maybe like stations, maybe not fully adapt in the environment, but with stations like currently NASA is doing, sending ships and like labs that stay sometime maybe in the atmosphere or in the space.
Hmm. If you could, would you take a trip to space?
Um, that for me that will be pretty exotic. I mean, the cost and all of that. If I could, I'll take it. Yeah.
Um, how far would you go? Just to orbit? Would you spend a week and go to the moon and back? Or if they did have a settlement on Mars and they were looking for colonists to live there, would you see yourself signing up for that?
I think to the moon. I think because I'm the kind the person that takes the step by step, so maybe to the moon and maybe to other place. Yeah.
Well, those are my standard questions that I ask people. But I also like to open it up in case you have questions or things that you want to talk about. I see this as being sort of a time capsule for people, 50 years, 100 years to kind of look back on what I think is going to be a transformational decade and what people are
Hmm.
thinking about it. But I was wondering if you had any questions for me or if there's something else you'd like to talk about.
Yes, because my question will be what do you think about this? Because in the past, and as you mentioned, maybe 10 years ago, 15 years, it was not in the mind of the people travel space, right? And now with all the spaceships and the plans that Elon Musk, we are going to have travel to out of Earth or something like that. How do you think that has impacted here in I mean the people like me that is not involved with the technology or the science to be more conscious or to start thinking more about the space and the ships?
Well, I think several things. One is, the Earth has been very lucky. We know that the dinosaurs were wiped out by an asteroid hitting the Earth,
Mm,
and we're constantly finding more asteroids that are getting close to the Earth, or you know uh, other other things. So I think by us having more insight into the asteroids and these near Earth objects, that we will have a better chance of being able to find out about them early enough to prevent wide scale damage. And
mm,
then the sun is very active in terms of solar flares and radiation, and kind of understanding uh, the sun a lot better, and when we might be at risk and when we uh, might be safe, I think is key. So you have like the protection side, but then mining is very damaging to the earth, and
mm,
there are asteroids that have a lot of the materials that we're mining. In fact, NASA is sending a probe to this asteroid called Psyche, which is thought to be a completely metallic asteroid.
mm,
And it might be possible for us to do all the mining and get all the resources we need from these asteroids and protect the ecosystems that we have here on Earth.
mm,
Also, another thing is the sun produces an enormous amount of energy, but only a very small fraction of it actually falls on the Earth. So potentially you could see a future where we could create solar panels in space that are orbiting the sun, and figure out some way to send that energy back to Earth
mm.
or to use it in space. And
Oh,
so these are kind of like futuristic ideas, and the steps that we're doing now are very small steps towards that. It's sort of like if you consider the difference between a baby just born and a marathon runner, these are the steps of the baby just trying to turn over on its side. So it hasn't even learned how to walk yet. So, but
yeah.
but it's the progression you have to go through in order to get there.
And speaking of that, because I have seen maybe like in the medical professions or something like that, some of the developments they have, some are inspired or they get the technology from NASA, right? Like NASA was investigating this and found this could be applied to medical supplies, this could be applied to this and that. Do you know or have a like an idea of how much the NASA investigations are impacting other areas?
Um, I think a lot of the research is very futuristic and very uh, uh, still hasn't made like a big impact. There is
Mm,
a company that is looking at creating pharmaceuticals in orbit. So the idea is that you would send up a satellite that has the different ingredients that you want to mix together. And then while you're in orbit, you're essentially constantly falling towards the Earth. So you don't have the perception of gravity, you don't feel the force of gravity, just like, you know, uh, uh, and they're able to like potentially create medicines and other materials in space that they can't do here on Earth. And then once they've made them, then they have a little pod that detaches and would land here on Earth, and then they would be able to um, distribute those medicines. So that's one thought. There's another idea of in free fall in orbit, creating
mhm,
like artificial organs like retinas and um, other things that would be very difficult to do here on Earth. So, but all of that is sort of exploratory
mm,
technology right now. If you want to talk about things that have had a real impact, I saw this company selling like jackets that was made out of a very light material that is very good insulator, that
mm,
they claim that was material that was invented, you know, during the space program.
Oh,
So, so there's that. But I mean, right now, I think one of the best things we get out of the space program is like the International Space Station, which, you know, we have 15 countries that have come together to make it work, and those countries have to
mm,
work every day, including the U.S. and Russia. So we um, we are constantly managing the space station together, and I think it's, you know, kind of like the Olympics or something like that. It's like one of these things that shows
mm.
that we can put aside a lot of the differences and challenges that we have in other areas and still work together here.
Yeah, I didn't know that because, Russia, US, the war and all of that, this friction there is. I didn't know they were cooperating in this ISS.
Yes, and in fact, after the space shuttle retired, all the American astronauts had to ride a Russian Soyuz rocket to the International Space Station. And even now, we have the ability to use SpaceX's Dragon capsule to transport people to International Space Station and back. But we're always concerned that maybe something would happen that would make one of these two vehicles unavailable. Maybe there was some accident and they want to
Mm,
stop the flight. So one thing that NASA and Russia does today is they swap astronauts. So they have an American ride up on the Soyuz, and they have a Russian ride up on the SpaceX Dragon, so that if something like that did happen, you would already have astronauts and cosmonauts trained in each other's systems.
mm,
So because of the agreement about the International Space Station is that there will always be an American and a Russian up there. And so they want to make sure that there's a way to to keep that in place.
well, that's interesting. Yeah,
So I think there's value to be had out of that. Um, you know, cooperation, learning to work together. You know, even if you don't,
yeah,
even if there's some areas that you're completely against, at least having some ways that you can stay in contact and do something constructive, I think is
yeah.
key.
Well, that's good. The cooperation.
Well, Paul, that was pretty much all I had. I'll go ahead and stop the recording now, if that's okay with you.
Sure.